The limits of human intellect. The ominous graves seemed to only serve the purpose of freakish adornment. Supposedly the forest had been deemed forbidden during a spreading sickness. But seeing the ancient graves, and how numerous they were, as well as the strange erosion on them, its moniker appeared much more haunting. The curious man Edward and Mayhew had encountered walked in front of them, supported by a rake. He had emerged out of nowhere and promptly accused them, rather politely, of disturbing the graves. Upon invoking the name of their destination, namely Bergenworth, the orange-robed man had piped up beneath his hideous mask and had flatly turned and walked. Now weary of a trap, they both followed precariously a bit behind, their threaded canes at the ready. The man never spoke to them, but they could hear what might be mutterings under his breath, but nothing distinguishable. He was a rather thought-provoking visage, for the robes he carried seemed ritualistic or ceremonial in nature, but was tattered and worn, much like that of a groundskeeper. Then there was the mask with 2 black round circles for eyes and an open, equally black maw. He must surely be a madman, but a madman that knew his way around.
"'Tis a cemetery?"
Edwarda broke the silence with awkward small talk.
"There are frightfully many graves. I never knew of its existence."
Typical.
His muttering grew briefly in volume, so they could hear the opinion he had about her query. It did not appear as if in response to them, more of an observation.
Is the institution far?"
Mayhew asked.
No, not at all. Just beyond the gate.
They looked about to find nothing of said gate in sight. They resigned to silence once more, and walked for a bit further through winding paths, littered with gravestones, none of which bore any inscriptions, and was only dubbed accordingly due to circumstantial similarities. His faculties were utterly delusional as to how he had implied the distance to the gate, as they walked for about 20 additional minutes until reaching it. Further adding to the unreasonable time span was how they had aimlessly walked in several winding paths that all looked the same. He suddenly stopped and threw with his hands indicatively further down the path.
No, off with you.
"What? It lies beyond this path?"
Sure. Give the old master my regards.
He started to turn and walk away.
"Wait! The old master? You mean Provost Willem? Is he alive?"
He let out a bellowing, deep laugh.
Oh, 'Oh, yes. Here. Sure is.
He threw up a hand and waved as his back was turned.
Or to tell that Osman to keep him out of my woods.
He muttered as he vanished among the brambles, having walked off the beaten path, straight into the thicket. Edwarda turned to Mayhew.
A grave guard, perhaps? But this cemetery... have you heard of it? I originally thought it was an ancient burial ground. Why would someone tend to it today? Yes. That man had a strange aura about him. Well, let's see if it was a deceptive one.
They continued onward, brushing away branches and vegetation from their path. The trail was faint and likely only used by that strange man, seeing how overgrown it was. But soon they emerged out into a clearing with a clear view of the cloudy sky. A tall stone wall lay at the end with a large gate inviting them to enter. The graves were absent on the other side, and the forest took on completely different properties. From the curved trees and strange growths in the ground, this was a pleasant oak forest. Soon, the famed but forgotten institution stood before them.
Is this it? This must be the main building. Indeed. Then more should lie just beyond it.
They headed through a small gate in a wall just beside the building, onto a stone-laid area just by the lakeside. With the main building on their left, standing right in front of the lake, they searched for additional structures, but none could be seen.
No dormitory? No lecture hall? This looks just to be a main office.
Ah. And where is everyone?
Hello?
Edwarda shouted. Only the faint wind and distant water hitting the shore was heard. They walked further out on the open area with a view over the lake. To their right, the forest quickly began to reach over the grounds. There was a door on the same short side as they now stood by. They knocked and were greeted by the same silence. The door gave way with ease by just a tug. Everything looked so well kept, like the occupants had only briefly stepped out. But knowing that Bergenworth had not been talked about for years, and long forgotten by the academic world, it was not too surprising to find it vacant.
Should we go in? No one is stopping us. Besides, we need to know the master is here at least. He might have poor hearing after all this time.
Right. Inside, everything seemed to be as it ought to, albeit in a less organized state. The dominant furniture was a desk along the right long side wall. The beginning of a curving stairwell ran up along the left to the second floor. Bookshelves towered and dominated the walls, and many dusty forms of instruments and miscellaneous seemed haphazardly positioned in odd places over the floor, chiefly being book piles and jars with strange contents. All in a poor state, but not necessarily abandoned.
Hello, Master Willem? Who was that man? And where is everybody? Seems like they all gone up and left.
I'll take a look upstairs. Eduardo walked over to the desk and rummaged around fleetingly. Mayhew continued up the winding staircase in the middle of the floor. Upstairs was a bit more put together. Further bookshelves filled with tomes reached all the way up to the ceiling. He peeked over the railing.
Psst!
She looked up at him, and he mouthed the word books and pointed behind him. She nodded and continued to pore over the papers on the desk. He caught sight of a door in the middle of the long side wall. It was slightly ajar. Upon closer inspection, the key was still held within the door. Looking out, he saw someone sitting in an extravagant rocking chair, gently moving back and forth. He stepped out.
Master Willem?
The robed and slumped figure did not react. He held a golden, ornate staff and bore a high hat, befitting a high-ranking preacher. Mayhew approached his side and saw that he wore a face mask concealing the eyes. An old face was hidden beneath. He looked to be incapable of moving, sitting as if having melted into the chair, yet held firmly the staff as the chair rocked.
You are Master Willem?
The man took a sharp inhale and pointed with the staff towards the lake. He looked to see where he indicated. The cloudy afternoon brought a temporary chill as he looked over the lake.
What? What is there?
Another exhausted breath. He did not seem capable of much, even simple speech. But he gestured once more for the lake. Mayhew walked intrigued to the very edge and peered over. Only water below, dark enough to not perceive its bottom. Small and gentle waves moved in and out to caress the stone on which the institution stood. A very vague round reflection lay just beneath him in the water. He was, however, distracted from contemplating it further. Had another one done what he did, they would only experience the serenity of the water's presence. But being of the arcane teachings, and quite proficient, he was always perceptive to the innermost machinations of his surroundings. It took him a while to react to it. Not a whisper or sound, nothing strange, just the water and nothing else. But he knew that incredibly seldom there was nothingness. He leaned back and viewed the horizon as he contemplated. There had been truly nothing. That in and of itself was something. A void. A pocket that contained the very manifestation of nothing. How does one describe what nothing is? A hard question indeed. It made him foolishly glare over the pleasant vista, ruminating on the nature of nothing. He returned back down towards the water, now concentrating on the thing unseen. A faint whisper, just like the nature of many others, if one had the ear for it. But unlike the rest, this one was comprehensible to him. Not like the inhuman utterings one can only feel the meaning of. This was a word. He looked back at Willem. He sat just as he was.
Rom. Did you hear it too?
The man rocked back and forth in an unending motion. It was not mad to guess that whisper came from him, but what could ever make him communicate in such a manner? The low, fleeting single word continued with his focus. He approached the man once more. He looked at his partially open mouth. The skin was almost greyish and drooped from underneath the queer mask. He reached out to place a hand on the heavily garbed shoulder. He did not touch his body, as the blue and white robes were like a puffed up bed cover. He focused once more, closing his eyes.
Rom.
Surprisingly, the word meant more to him now. He pictured a large sea, an unending sea, under a white cloudy sky. Strangely, there was a spider on this sea, standing atop the water's surface. Though he could not see it within a coherent image, he understood it to be the meaning of Rom. The specific impression referred to this spider. A spider on a sea. He recalled the deep sea rune discovered by Caril herself long ago. Though this spider was new, an addition to the meaning of the rune. No, its center. Rom. He said the word himself.
Rom.
Again, but he was no wiser. He removed his hand and looked at the old provost.
What is Rom?
The response was another strained sigh and a point towards the lake with the ornamental staff. Mayhew shook his head. Normally, insight would be provided by the unseen surrounding arcane. Here there was nothing. An anomaly within something anomalous. The experience was admittedly somewhat humbling, as it reminded him of the days when he was blind to the world's greater and unseen machinations. A world that was more simple, but lacking. He then heard the sound of distress, an unusual tone of low quality, the voice of Eduarda. Being initially muffled, it arose in volume and quality, revealing it as a frightened and utterly panicked scream that blew out from the door down from the first floor. He rushed in and leaned over the wooden railing of the upper floor to search in terror. He saw her as she lay crawling on her knees and arms in a frenzied escape over the wooden floor. He hurried along the railing towards the stair. A wooden latch in the floor stood open, from which she had presumably emerged. He hasted down, and she slammed it shut with such fervent reluctance that she was about to tumble back to the floor while withdrawing from it.
We are leaving. I want to leave.
The distress had her on the verge of tears, and her eyes were wide open, darting over the room. What in the world? Calm yourself. What did you find? Despite her genuine performance, the uncanny calm that lay over the building made any speculation as to what had caused her outburst elusive. She looked towards the exit, then behind her at the now closed hatch. She grabbed both his shoulders and moved him aside to the door. What? Wait! Hold on just a moment. Master Willem, he's here.
Grab the satchel.
She pointed towards an over-encumbered leather shoulder bag that lay on the floor. A similar one was slung over her own shoulder. Books partially emerged from the opening, not quite fitting inside. Her decisive panic left little room for objection, and he did as he was told and plucked the inventory up and followed her out. She was already escaping down the path on which they had arrived, with no intentions of waiting. He had to sprint with a heavy pack to catch her. Now, tell me for God's sake, what has you this upset? You must have seen a spectre.
Worse, they have horrible abominations in the basement.
Huh?
Completely frenzied.
She proclaimed while still maintaining her efficient walking speed. Only now did he see a faint streak of blood on her threaded cane, mixed with another clearer substance.
They had eyes all over them. I barely made it off the ladder until one took shape wordlessly from the darkness.
Oh, by the gods. Were they hostile?
What do you think?
She snapped. Well, did we get everything of worth?
We will just have to come back. And preferably someone other than me. But that basement must be some old excavation site. It was ginormous. Blindfold cap. Attire of the choir, high-ranking members of the Healing Church. Members of the choir are both the highest-ranking clerics of the Healing Church and scholars who continue the work that began at Bergenworth. The eye covering indicates their debt to the teachings of Master Willem, even though their paths diverged.